Today's video, I wanted to try something a little different than I've been doing. I like doing my landscapes and stuff like that, but my original love was, skulls and, just different stuff like that when I was a kid. Um, heavy metal album covers, stuff like that. I've always really liked. So I had this skull I drew on another piece of paper and traced this on some watercolor paper just in pencil. Um, and I've been really wanting to try this idea out for a little bit, using some washes here and some inks. Um, so this is just a random little thing that I tried, just dropping some different colors in on a on a wet piece of watercolor paper and let those dry. And then I thought I wanted to do this like a red orange. So I just went in a little light, kind of blocking everything in of the general shape. And this was more for the skull, not the background. That was just kind of having fun with it. But I overlapped a little bit. I wish I would have taken better care to maybe get the background. Maybe I should have masked this off, and it would have come out a little bit better. But this paper doesn't really take well to erasing the masking medium or anything like that. So I probably should have just taken my time a little bit better, where I wet the paper. But we'll see how it turns out. So I just went with the regular base, kind of darkened where I knew I was going to have some shading going on. Um, and it's different with watercolors. You kind of, instead of working from dark to light like I would with acrylics, it's quite the opposite. So it's easy to go overboard really quick. You can see how dark that got right away. And they do lighten up when they dry a little bit, but you can see the massive contrast from the first layer and this second layer I just did. So it can be easy to overdo it. Um, but I just kept building up on it and making mistakes and trying to work them out a little bit. Like I said, I knew where my dark shadows were gonna be. This is an ink drawing that I have on another piece of paper, so I kind of had it all mapped out already. Um, just trying to soften some stuff up right there. But I can always go a little bit darker, where I need to. Maybe add some super red stuff later on. So I have a general shape going on and then darken up. You can see how they kind of lightened up a little bit after I dried it with the hair dryer, which is a key. I have a nice cheap hair dryer that I use for this stuff, and it really does help speed up the process. So we're just going to block in some of those super dark areas, in the eyes and the nose and above the brow and the temple area. Those seem to be the darkest spots on this one, underneath that jaw. And I think I want to start leaning towards this style a little bit more as I go on, as I'm learning watercolors. Like I said, I do like the skulls and everything like that. I'll do different things to keep learning, but um, I used to do this type of artwork a lot, just not watercolor, it'd just be an ink drawing. So in here, I'm just adding little tiny details of some darker orange, red orange, where I think the light's gonna not hit. You're kind of painting the light is something that I've heard lately. But with watercolors, I think you're painting more of the shadow, and it's kind of weird to work backward that way. So I started off a little bit dark there, and I don't think I really like that. I spread it out a little bit. There we go. But you can see I have the light orange, the medium orange, and this red orange, and I'm kind of grading it towards those darker areas of the eye socket right there, leaving some of that stuff a little lighter. Add a little bit more texture here and there. It is easy to overwork this stuff, but it's all an experiment. I'm still learning how to watercolor, draw in general. you know, using inks, everything I'm still new on, but it's just practice. Whatever you think looks good, it's your art, you know. Nice underneath that the roof of the mouth, kind of blocking those teeth out a little bit. The teeth were a hard part. I did kind of wash them a little bit orange. I think they came out pretty good with that light orange color. Um, instead of just being a plain white, maybe I could have added like a yellow orange in there. Would have looked pretty good and stood out a little bit better against the rest of it, especially on that bottom jaw. I'm coming up in here with some little darker colors, getting those little nooks and crannies kind of blocked out, and just some general shapes with that stuff. Spreading that out with some water a little bit. It was a little too um harsh, so I kind of mixed the wet brush over that stuff a little bit. I wish I would have done it on the top a little bit more, but I think it came out pretty good. Just texture, 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 trying to get those shapes to make sense without having it to be too dark. And then I think this is my final wash of darks, which was almost a purple color. And you got to kind of be careful. You'll ruin a watercolor by adding just a bit too much, So just the slightest bit will go a long way. Kind of blending everything in. And this was really fun to just kind of play around with textures and this orange color and just have fun with it. So this is where I did a drawing slash watercolor a couple weeks back of a lighthouse, and I didn't like how it turned out, so I added some ink on it. I think it really helped um save that one, but I really liked how it turned out at the end with the little details I can add with my ink pens. The autofocus is pretty bad when I do this, but so forgive the video. Um, but I think having the combination of my ink drawing and the washes of the watercolor are kind of a neat little effect that I'm going to keep experimenting with. I think it just kind of ties it all together. Another thing I'm trying to do lately is kind of figure out my style, I guess, You I find myself not copying but grabbing um ideas from people and their style and seeing how it works for me, and I kind of manipulate and morph it into my own. On some things it doesn't work, most things it doesn't work, but I think that's part of the process, is figuring out what works for you and what you enjoy and what you like. So I think I'm gonna play with this a little bit more as time goes on. So I'm just cutting in with this number '03 ink marker that I have. My superfine one is pretty dead, but this one seems to do a decent job of being thin enough. And just kind of adding some little bits of outline in there. And I can kind of go in those darker areas that I blocked out with the reddish orange. And that is the scary part, is coming in and starting your crosshatch. I didn't know how it was going to turn out, if it was going to be too dark. To me, that's the hardest part, is starting the crosshatch for the shading. But I think if you go over your, if you put your washes in the correct spot, it kind of helps out with a roadmap for me. I'm still kind of new at this and experimenting, but it's pretty fun. And some texture to the teeth here, kind of making them look a little more, or a little less just shapes, and getting underneath that cheekbone. The nose is something I think, or the nose socket, I think came out pretty well on this one. And like I said before, making sure I don't blow everything out with just these crosshatch lines. And just kind of adding those final texture details in there. You can see I'm a little timid on where to go. I don't want to overdo it. But I think the more I add, it kind of helps everything come together with a little bit of that texture. And I prematurely started ripping the tape off right here, realizing I wasn't done. I wanted to add some, maybe a bolder outline. So I got my brush pen. Somewhere in here, it's coming. There it is. For like a little bolder outline of everything. I think it kind of made it pop. And this is how it turned out on my ink drawing, just the regular black and white ink drawing that I did. I did a bold outline like this, and it looked pretty good. So I figured I'd do that again, just on the outer edges of everything. Kind of get that bold line on those, make them pop out just a little bit more. I think that really, really set it off, was that bold brush outline right there. And another thing I did on my ink drawing that this concept came from is I outlined it with this Montana cans ink pen, brush pen, I don't know, paint pen. That's the word I'm looking for. And it looked really cool, and I thought I'd do that again here. Well, it turns out right when I started, it's really close to the color of the background. So it would have been cooler if maybe if I had a different color, like a green, like a neon green would look cool, or a purple or something like that. So, but this is the only color I had, and I figured it was too late, so I just went with it anyway. But maybe next time I'll get a couple different colors of these paint pens and hit the outline of them. I think that's kind of a cool little look, a little abstract kind of border on there. And good enough because you can't really see most of it. And here's the final shots. I think it came out really neat. It's kind of different than what I've been doing, and I think this is a path I'd like to go down a little bit more. Watching all these other artists and stuff and getting inspiration. Um, just experiment. Try something new. If it doesn't work out, I'm sure you learned something from it. I learned a lot from this one, and this is one of my favorite paintings I've done so far since I've started watercoloring, and I can't wait to do more of these. So, just try and step out of your comfort zone and try something new, and see how it works out for you. Thanks for watching this one. I have another one coming out in a couple weeks. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.